Joining us now on Practical 365 is Karin Shapski. Hi, Karin, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Steve. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you're going to be at Tech later this year, and I'm very interested in your session. But before we dive into that, and Copilot as well, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do? Because I think many people know you as a writer on Practical 365. Do you want to give us a bit of background as to what you do at the moment in your new job?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have just recently joined Microsoft as a partner solutions architect for Copilot. And so what that means is I am working with Microsoft partners to help them build out solutions based around Copilot for their business. So whether that is workshops, assessments, helping them come up with use cases for extensibility, it's a pre-sales role. I've just recently come from an implementation role where I was focusing on a lot of SharePoint, OneDrive information, security information architecture. So it dovetails really nicely into the Copilot conversation.
So a lot of the conversations customers have with partners or have with Microsoft will be but you won't be a stranger to then around understanding data and where it is, and I suppose Delve being a similar problem for SharePoint information architecture going back like 6 or 7 years now.
Exactly. I remember when Delve was freaking everybody out and people were wanting to turn it off without really understanding it. There's that quote, right? Know your enemy.
Yeah.
So yeah, knowledge is power.
Yeah, and I suppose knowing your data is difficult for IT departments to accomplish because they're not the owners of a lot of the data, right? So is that a big challenge that you've seen with customers and now partners in your new role? Is it about the data, or is it about business change and adoption?
It's a bit of both. Prior to rolling out Copilot, certainly the conversation is about data. It's exposing a lot of, it's kind of like when you have company over and then you have a mess in your living room, so you kind of sweep things under the rug and shove them into the closet. It feels a bit like that sometimes, right? Because, we like to think that we have great, even just data management principles, like in terms of keeping data current and getting rid of what we don't need. But a lot of organizations have a lot of information sprawl. And so that's been a huge thing as well, not just the security conversation.
You get some customers, I suppose, who have deployed all of this stuff. They've done all the right things, and then OneDrive overshare it. People do things the way that they do things. And I've had customers say the same thing, right? They don't know what they don't know, because they don't have the tools often to go and do this. So you've got quite an interesting job there. And I think a colleague of mine is going to do the same job at Microsoft as you over in the UK. And I can imagine a lot of partners are going to be quite thankful for the assistance in many cases.
Yes, I think so. I think lots of opportunities we're seeing, especially with Copilot extensibility, right? Copilot can act as that gateway into more. So once organizations start using, whether that's Copilot for Microsoft 365 for the typical enterprise, or maybe it's a more developer-heavy organization using GitHub Copilot. Once they get familiar with that concept, they start loving the idea of a Copilot. Then you can dream bigger and go, okay, what's next? We want a custom Copilot that is trained around these specific things, or maybe dive into Azure OpenAI and actually optimize something maybe to work with a specific type of document, right? So
I want to ask you more about Copilot, obviously, shortly. But your tech session then is a problem that's very familiar to us on the Practical 365 podcast, because a big thing that we're always having to do is obviously go through all of the new stuff on the roadmap. So a session that if I get to tech, I will definitely want to attend is this. And it's also a problem that a lot of my customers have too. So do you want to tell us a bit about your session and what sort of problems it solves?
thank you. Yeah, totally. My session, I was inspired actually by all of the administrators that I've worked with in a consulting capacity, because they're asking things like, how do you find the time to stay up on top of all of these things? If you're doing it manually, it is quite time consuming. So I wanted to show people different ways that they can automate that to keep current on all of these announcements, especially whether they have access to the admin message center or not. That was another thing I saw, is that, oftentimes I tell admins, okay, just go to the message center. But for particularly large organizations, maybe they didn't necessarily have access because somebody didn't know how to give them access to just that. So,
and I think for a lot of people who are listening will know this already, but for those that don't, then you get a different cut of messages depending on your tenant, don't you, in there?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not necessarily telling you everything in a broader sense. So that could be detrimental as well, right? So
yeah, and that's where there could be something really important that if you miss it, then it's a service desk ticket from a group of users. Change to something in tune might then have an impact on your organization, and it's been pulled out by Microsoft for you. So your session is about automating a lot of that, and what do you think somebody can take back from that to do themselves, and I guess if it helps them to pay it forward?
Yeah, so actually, that's a really good point. This session is not just for administrators to take care of their own needs. This could be a repeatable process and an offering that you could give to your customers, right? Like, who isn't looking for something like that? And whether it's from an IT perspective, maybe it's keeping on top of Microsoft 365 announcements, maybe tailored to an admin perspective, maybe tailored to the end user, maybe it's pulling from different data sources entirely. But this is an offering that people can actually package up and provide.
Because a big part of this is RSS feeds and things like that, isn't it? For things like roadmaps, which applies still, I guess, to lots of different data sources, which might be a marketing team who have industry-related news that they need to keep up to date with. Everyone, in a business has their own thing that they're good at, and it's easy to think that we're like in some important IT-related niche, but there's probably a podcast for accountants. I imagine
there's a podcast for everything.
Exactly, yeah. So someone's keeping up to date with the latest news in the accountancy world every week, but probably no. I bet you it's got more listeners than we're getting, because there's more accountants out there.
The same way that we're making fun of them, that's how my friends make fun of me when they hear the stuff I listen to. Yeah, that's my family when I send them my practical 365 articles. They're like, "Nice job, sweetie."
So yeah, but IT people have always got we always get a little bit of ribbing anyway. So pushing back a little bit isn't too bad. But yes, I know that there's going to be people in the business who will benefit from almost the direct copy of this. But then business-related stuff, keeping on, you could use that to generate personalised information, I suppose, to feed to people around company news and so on. It could help you automate comms.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the benefits to wrapping that automation around it, is you're not necessarily just getting everything from an RSS feed. You can tailor it to filter out or to emphasize certain keywords, certain things. And actually a good point about the business and the pitching the usefulness of it is, I think a lot of us in IT, we love automation, we love tinkering, but we might not necessarily get that buy-in from the business. And with all of the hype and the buzz about Copilot, people are listening when you say Copilot. Yeah. And I'm not sure if you saw the announcements about agents.
Yes. Yeah.
So really, these custom Copilots are they're like service accounts, right? They're automating business processes. It's not really a new concept to us, but if organizations are seeing success from the buy-in with Copilot for 365 or other, prepackaged Copilot offerings, they might actually be more willing to listen to someone in IT saying, "Hey, we should maybe automate this with an agent."
Yeah, and so so Copilot Studio is Power Virtual Agents, and the announcement was around having multiple agents working in concert to achieve a task for you, which is the weird thing is, for a session that I'm doing on Microsoft AutoGen at a user group next month, I was looking at a similar challenge. I've not got it finished yet because I used Microsoft AutoGen, which it's like two GPTs working and then talking together, or three, and then one coordinating them. And one of my first attempts had them agreeing to do the task, and they, so one saying, "Yes, I'll get that done," and the other one saying, "Right, I'm getting on it. Have you not started yet?" "Yes, I have," and that failed. But if you know what you're doing, or if it's packaged like I imagine Copilot Studio agents will be, then it avoids that part of it. But the idea is that these agents can go and, I guess, in my example, I had one working on collecting the information from the roadmap and another to evaluate it, so that you get a better result out of the generative AI by giving it a second pass, effectively, on looking at info. But it solves a problem when you try and start using something, I suppose, of what to start with, because you need a problem to solve to get going with tech, don't you? Well, at least I do.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's all about, right, why are we doing this and what's in it for me? What's in it for me, whether it's you or, again, the business or the customer. Yeah.
And is that a common thing that you encourage people to ask of their users or both themselves?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure we've all been part of projects where we're not sure exactly who asked for it or why we're doing it or why anybody's doing it, but we're just doing it because we've been told to.
Yeah.
What is it called? The sunk cost fallacy. When you've already started with something and you've invested time or effort or money, and then you just keep going with it. Yeah, hopefully we can avoid that by sussing out why we're doing something before we start with it.
And going back to Copilot, then, I guess a problem that people might have is picking who is going to use Copilot or who to assign licenses to. So you can, I guess, explain to them what's in it for them. Because there's one question, I guess, to ask before the other in that situation.
No, exactly. I mean, of course, being from Microsoft, we're saying, everybody can benefit from Copilot and everybody should have Copilot in their hands. But the reality is, like, the licenses are quite expensive. And so a lot of organizations have to be really strategic about who they assign them to. So something that I help partners with is sussing out those use cases with their customers as they're going through workshops and so on.
And I suppose there's a different. Also, I say Copilot. I mean Copilot for Microsoft 365.
Yeah.
But if you're a developer, you might not need your emails summarized. Maybe you would like the Teams premium type functionality, I guess. But it might be GitHub Copilot. There's a different Copilot as well. So but if we're talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365 as the sort of the biggest uplift for a lot of workers, information workers, then how do you pick the right people to start with? Because I see a lot of excitement from people in businesses about what the thing is, but the person who wants it the most might not necessarily be the person who knows what has the best use for it, I suppose.
Yeah, no, exactly. And honestly, like I am seeing that with organizations where Copilot licenses are being assigned based on who maybe the favorites are in the organizations or the most customer facing or what have you, and not necessarily people who can benefit most from the license. So really we have to think about, like, what does Copilot help you do, right? It helps you create content, summarize, understand content, catch up on tasks. It's huge for project managers. I think every project manager should have a Copilot license. Sales type roles, even consulting roles. I mean, how many times do we have screen share sessions with clients where we're trying to take notes as we're doing the work, as we're telling them what we're doing?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So people are in lots of meetings and participating as well, as in they don't have time to take notes. Or, I say that. Have you found, I don't know whether you find yourself more present or not. I thought I'd be more present in the meeting because I use Copilot, but I don't know whether I'm still taking my own notes as well. I went wise back to that. Have you managed to avoid taking any notes in meetings when you can use Copilot?
Yes, I have. Yes. I mean, it depends, right? For certain things, like if it's an absolutely, I must remember this, I'm writing it down manually a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't know if I've actually run into a case where Copilot hasn't included that in the notes, but
Yeah.
there's that. It's like taking the training wheels off, right? But actually a good point about the notes. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
even just about having time to make notes. It's also about understanding what people are talking about. A lot of the time, the
Yeah.
note takers are not necessarily like, as somebody in a technical implementation role, sometimes project managers would be taking notes and they'd take notes about things that weren't important, but the things that were important didn't end up getting any notes. And
Yeah.
so Copilot helps with that. It also helps if the person on that side doesn't know what two technical people are talking about. You can say, hey, Copilot, can you actually explain that in a simpler way while the meeting is going on, and they have a better idea of what's what.
And the use cases like the one you just mentioned. So just in case anyone missed it, tell me that again, because I think things like that are the kind of things that people just don't really pick up on when they're using Copilot, when they're thinking about how people will use it.
I hear you. Yeah, you mean like asking Copilot questions during a meeting rather than just relying on it to summarize? Well, yeah, totally.
Not
That's
just
one of
about
the
what you missed, but also explaining things.
Exactly. Yeah, because if I was just looking to recap a meeting, I would just get a Teams premium license. So, explaining information in a particular way. Can you format all of the takeaways from this meeting into a table, or can you look at this presentation and tell me what would be important for an executive? What would be important for an IT manager, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those kind of things are powerful in not just the meetings, but also, other content that you're working on. But I think exploring those kind of use cases where it's got a bit of creativity in it in terms of the problem you're solving, and that's the bit that somebody in the business is going to pick up on, that takes it beyond what their new Samsung phone might be able to do if they just put the voice app on, right? It's giving them, you can ask it questions you'd ask of ChatGPT basically in the meeting to understand and analyze. That's I think that's a really sort of smart use of it. So if you take one thing away when you come in with these use cases, actually, that's definitely one. But assigning is to roles like project managers, you mentioned a lot of these roles where they're people who are processing a lot of information. They are the central crux of something, and perhaps a common theme to this that I've seen is they're people who are busy, and people might say, I wish we could duplicate them and have more of that one person, right? And how do you sort of ramp down to, I guess, the person who wouldn't work any harder if you gave them a license?
Right. Yeah, good point. Because the idea of Copilot is so that you don't have to work harder and so that you can get more done. So people who won't necessarily realize the benefits. I mean, the Copilot adoption story reminds me a lot of cloud adoption. And sorry, I should say Copilot enablement. That's the term that we're using rather than adoption. But it reminds me a lot of cloud adoption because if you think about working in the cloud, co-authoring documents, it's a little bit more of an uplift to share a link to somebody, to manage permissions, to do all of that so that you can work in the cloud together. And so I can't even count how many organizations I've helped with cloud projects where you bring all the benefits of this technology to them, but then they're still emailing attachments back and forth because they're like, it's just too much effort. I just want to use Skylinks. I just want to attach it like I always have. And so you're going to get people like that with Copilot who are like, it's too much extra work. I'm good. I'm just going to keep doing what I've done. So you really have to spend that time to realize the benefits yourself and actually try it out. And not everything in Copilot is going to be for you. I barely use Excel. I hardly use, if you look at telemetry, I'm probably never opening it, but people need to at least try it out and be curious. So people who don't like to tinker and play with things, who just want to stay with the status quo, it is challenging to get them to use Copilot.
Because it may take them longer to get the benefit, I guess. Because if you open Excel, because you've got to do something, then you might find it actually save you half a day of binging searching the internet for, I can't say Google now. Actually, I can, because I don't work at Microsoft. Searching for an answer on some random form to try and help you do something in Excel, and then it doesn't work. You try another way, and I don't like Excel much. I'm not an accountant, so I found it really useful in make me a formula to do this. I want to get a summary of these things, and it gave me the formula, and I was very happy with that. To be honest, that's it. That would have saved the cost of the license alone for a couple of hours that I'd have otherwise spent trying to get it to do something fairly onerous.
Right. And you're looking through all of the guidance online and trying to figure out which article is most relevant, or even if you're using, Copilot in Bing or ChatGPT and asking questions of how to do something, it might not necessarily apply to what you're doing in Excel at that moment. So when you're using Copilot in Excel, it really is, saving that time. Gosh, we're really ripping on accountants in this podcast today.
Well, yeah, and I guess like when Copilot and Excel improve you, if you're an accountant, you're an Excel expert. And we talked about it in the podcast. There was an Excel ESPN sports thing. And I did mention it to our accountants at work. I was having a beer with our finance director, and they were like, who would win if it was us? So people really like Excel, and we have jobs in IT doing Microsoft 365 stuff because of that. So I'm not ripping up on accountants, but they know how to do a lot of the stuff. I don't, and I honestly had to stop myself from looking on the internet. I'm like, hold on, I could ask Copilot to do this, and so that was a moment for me when it was actually genuinely useful. Especially you have to remember when you're doing it to give this guidance and keep on pushing that to your user base so they can get the most out of it.
Yes, that's actually so. You bring up a really good point though, with not being an Excel expert yourself and finding benefit with Copilot for Excel. That's an angle that I don't see discussed often. Is like, I think it seems like people think, great, I'm in Excel all the time and Copilot can help me. But if you're an expert in Excel, I don't know if I should be saying this, but
I'll say it.
It might not be
it's
that
not going to
helpful,
be as
right?
useful.
No,
exactly.
I mean, I do a lot of graphic design. I do slides, and I find with PowerPoint sometimes it's great to get me started, but it's not going to be able to do anything that I can't. So yeah, it fills in the gaps.
I think there's nothing wrong with you saying, because I've heard people at Microsoft with enterprise customers saying the same thing. If you're the world's best expert at it, then why would you get Copilot to do it for you? Unless it got you somewhere faster. If you could write at a million miles an hour, then you might not need it. It might take you longer if you're an Excel whiz. But most of us aren't expert. Well, none of us are experts at everything, and there's things we don't want to be good at. All right.
Tony Redmond might be, but
exactly. Like the Tony Redmond probably won't need so much Copilot help as me.
No.
So I've said this on the podcast. I imagine Tony Redmond as my perfect resistor person in an organization who doesn't want to use it to help with drafting emails and so on, because they're not just an email server expert, they're experts at tapping away on the keyboard and writing them very, very quickly as well. There's people who don't want to be an expert at these things, or they wish that they sounded a little bit better, but they don't have time to. I've seen some execs who liked poetic prose that Copilot generated, and I don't think they honestly ever used it again that way after being shown it. But some do, some will go back to no, send, but some will prefer to have a little bit more, I don't know what's the word, have a little bit more tact that they wouldn't usually have.
I mean, I love writing. It's ironic because I work as a Copilot solution architect, but I do take issue with for certain things having AI generate content for you, right? Like, I'm not going to write a blog. I'm not going to have Copilot write a blog for me. That just, for me, morally doesn't make sense, and also it's painfully obvious. Yes. And I don't tend to use Copilot to write my emails unless if I'm feeling like a bit of writer's block, I will get it to generate a draft and then I'll tweak it myself. What I'm using it a lot for is email coaching. So like coaching my tone, because sometimes I can be too direct and I don't realize it depends on who I'm talking to. So it might say, hey, maybe add a bit more detail, be a bit more friendly. Super helpful for that.
Yeah. But I quickly found you can't ask it to be a bit more direct and aggressive, Even if you say our culture is to be direct and, say what you think. It's like, nope, not going to do that. I can only do good.
It depends on how you ask it. There are ways around it, just like there's ways around the GIF filters in Teams.
I am joking, but obviously we're testing this as part of a preview program. And you want to see what the limits are as well, because that's naturally the concern. But there's not going to be enough safety barriers, right? But we had Jonathan, for VP of Safety at Microsoft, who seems very passionate about that topic and making sure that it is safe and so on. Has your experience been that Copilot, once they actually deploy it, it's not as bad as they think it is in terms of the content it's going to hoover up or the outputs it generates? Or have you had a few cases where people perhaps jumped the gun and went ahead too early with it?
Firsthand, I haven't worked with any organizations that have jumped the gun. I have heard that some have, but most of what I'm seeing is irrelevant content, right? Like Copilot is bringing up things that should have been archived that are still around.
Yes, absolutely.
And there are also there's the inbuilt protections into Copilot, so you can't ask for specific things like that are the criminal activities. It's filtered out. So whether your organization has locked those things down or not, I just won't allow it due to the meta prompting that's built into it.
But I'd ask one question as a partner, asking a Microsoft Copilot partner expert. The more information about how some of these things work, I guess the better, because customers do want to understand the inner workings of the safety mechanisms as well, so they know what those limits are. Do you get asked about that a lot?
Yeah, especially from IT admins. They're really curious about how it works, because once you know how it works, once you know the rules, you can break them, kind of thing. It's easier to understand and to guide customers when you're familiar with it. Even things as simple as, and we have to remember as well, there are things that we take as obvious facts. Oh yeah, everybody would know this, but not necessarily, even if they are in IT. So for instance, something like, I've heard of organizations who want to be able to use Copilot, but they don't have any of their data in the cloud due to regulatory reasons. So they want to use Microsoft, they want to use graph connectors. Right. The issue with that is that's bringing it into the cloud. Exactly.
Yes, that sounds like there's another conversation once you bottom this out that we should have about where the data could possibly end up through that process. But I don't. We probably shouldn't start that topic.
No, that's
for that, because absolutely, because that's an interesting topic in itself.
Yeah.
And
back to adoption. Do you mind if I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Something that we are seeing a lot of success with at Microsoft internally as customer zero, if you will, is in building communities around Copilot. So for us, it's Viva Engage. For an organization, I like to meet people where they're at, right? If a company is not using Viva Engage, don't push it on them. Maybe use Teams, or even heck, if they're sending everything up through email, then create an email newsletter, right? Just whatever way is going to get the information to people, because the way that we use Copilot and the way that we think of using it, like we are just one limited, like you said, not everybody can be an expert in everything, but we all have different perspectives and opinions to bring to things. So your colleague over there might have a way that they use Copilot that you've never even thought of. And so if you're sharing all of that across the organization, people are going to realize more benefits with using it. Yeah.
I think there's several podcast interviews and probably more articles that we should ask if you'd be interested in writing as well. But I'll finish off by saying, so you're speaking at Tech later this year. and you're going to be helping people at least stay on top of the changes through showing how to automate a lot of this stuff. And I think that's definitely going to be a really interesting session with a lot of takeaways. But thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and for talking about so much stuff as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so funny enough, last year was actually my first time attending tech. My colleagues and myself had a blast there, and we all walked away from it. We were all in technical roles. We're all going, this conference had so much value compared to, a lot of conferences you go there, it's like a lot of sales presentations and swag, but you walk away not really learning anything that you didn't know beforehand. And that can definitely not be said for tech. I mean, it's chock full of value, of knowledge, of people who have been there in the trenches, who know what they're talking about, and it's super fun. So
yeah. I think that's the biggest promo we could possibly get for tech, actually. So we'll have to put that at the beginning of every advert for the show. When we start talking about tech, I'm probably Jennifer, the organizer of tech, will want to stick that quote on the website as well.
Perfect. I'm all over the video for Tech 2023. Actually, if you look at the thumbnail, I'm in it. So nobody's paid me for it. I mean, but
thank you so much again for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.